From the Post Building in downtown North St. Louis, this is Inside City. This week I sat down with Joel Fuoss, principal at Trivers Architecture firm in St. Louis, known for their innovative designs and community engagement. Joel has played a key role in notable projects like the Gateway Arch Museum and the Art and Design Building expansion at Southern Illinois University, earning multiple awards from the American Institute of Architects. Beyond his architectural achievements, Joel actively contributes to the community as an advisor for St. Louis Artworks and as a board member for Citizens for Modern Transit, demonstrating his commitment to enhancing urban spaces and fostering sustainable development. Joel, thanks for coming by today. I'm trying to think about, we overlap Trivers by a day or something. I don't know. You've been there most of your career. I left there in 2001. When did you actually start there?
I started in it would have been June of 2002.
Yeah.
So yeah, we almost.
Yeah, I was there, I think, very end of 2001.
Yeah.
So interesting that I was there just a couple of years, but Trivers as an architecture firm has been very much involved in urban issues in St. Louis with Andy Trivers.
Yeah. It was one of the things that drew me to the firm when I was looking for firms coming out of school. A couple of the projects that I remember at the time, the 830 DeMun, which is right there down the street from Caldy's in Clayton. I just felt like it was a really nice, sensitive project that was, modern in its day and was a big part of that.
I think that was Jerry King was the developer on that, and Tyler was the
Tyler Stevens.
Was the architect. Went off to kind of do his own thing.
Yeah.
So, and I think one of the things that's interesting about Trivers is the range of work that the company does, as far as everything from multifamily housing, some larger government. I think you guys worked on the Capitol and for the state of Missouri and other government projects.
Yeah. I'd say a lot of that is intentional, maybe from a business standpoint, to be sustainable and not put all our eggs in one basket. But we really try, I think, to utilize a lot of that cross-pollination in the market sectors to help inform some of the other sectors that aren't necessarily directly related. So, we do cultural work, for Lawmeyer or the Sheldon or some other folks around town, but also the multifamily. But you see in that, I think we weave some of those tendencies into those projects, and you start to see elements of one sector and another that I think informs, the richness of our work.
And actually, another coincidental thing, we both went to school at Champaign, Illinois, and then on to WashU. So were you wrapped up with your graduate work at WashU, or was that in between? Or when you first started with Trivers around 2002, where were you on that in terms of academics?
Yeah, I went right from University of Illinois to WashU. Mm-hmm. So I graduated in 2000 from University of Illinois, and then came there that summer to WashU, and was looking. I wanted to go to a big university for undergrad, and then really try to counterbalance that in grad school with a much more intimate experience.
And you've worked on a range of projects. I mean, I believe your entire architectural career has been at Trivers, right?
I had a brief hiatus. It was about 2 years. People in the firm say it was a walkabout, as some people refer to. But I worked with, it was under what originally was McGowan Development, and then transitioned to Blue Urban back in right before the recession.
I see.
Yeah, so I had a brief stint there for about 18 months. It was a great opportunity to start an architecture firm. I'd always wanted to start an architecture firm with two other gentlemen. We started that under the umbrella, as we kind of all know how things unfolded in 2007, 2008, and I returned to Trivers at that time and have been there since.
And you've hinted at this a little bit as far as on some of the projects you've worked on with Lohmeyer Park, mm-hmm. and working on the visitor center there, as well as were you involved with the Gateway Arch renovation and what people may not always be aware of, there can be a local architect or a national one, and
Right.
talk about working at the scale of something like a Gateway Arch and how you got involved in that.
Yeah, I mean that certainly has been a highlight over the last, first part of my career here. And we were hired as the associate architect under Cooper Robertson, who was hired by Michael Van Valkenburg for the specific focus on the Arch Museum as part of the Arch to Park work.
And not to interrupt, but Valkenburg, are they more landscape, or they were looking at more of the grounds in the larger area?
Yeah, they
And
were awarded. So, going back, they had the competition for the grounds and then narrowed it down to the teams. And the Michael Van Valkenburg team was led as a landscape master plan firm to the grounds. So it was a much more grounds forward approach, I think, that helped them ultimately win and then focus on the building itself.
so right now over at Washington University and their the museum, the Kemper Museum, they have a urban design show that's going on that focuses on St. Louis, and there are
Yeah.
renderings of the arch there and some of the original competition, and the what we ended up with before the renovation or the addition was different than what we got.
Yeah.
And some of those renderings had a different concept. And Valkenberg's plan, I think, was to return more closer to what Saarinen had envisioned, right?
Yeah, seeing the way that whole thing has developed, that arch, the arch wasn't completed until what 65, and they started clearing the grounds in the 30s, and so there was a big arc of time there that things had changed, and just reorienting the entry of the museum back towards the city, was a big move. Really just symbolically, but also practically from a pedestrian flow that really, I think, has helped, connect the city back to the grounds that it ignored.
And how is Trivers involved? You mentioned through then the museum.
Yeah, so we were then hired by Cooper Robertson as the museum architect. They had also worked with JP Carpenter Design out of in New York, excuse me, and his notoriety has been glass design, and they kind of knew that this entry just wanted to be this very streamlined glass. So we were the group here in own town, and really helping to kind of bring some of the details together from Jamie Carpenter's vision to Cooper Robertson's um, I guess, management of the project, and we had different components that we were responsible for that. But it was a 7-year duration that we were working on details to sections of the work that we converted the entire Odyssey Theater into the new museum store, and to kind of almost everything in between.
7 years, huh? That's
7 years.
quite a bit of length of time.
Yeah.
And I guess things like the capital project and anything involving the federal government tends to have those long time frames.
It does. The original goal on the Arch project was to have it open by October of 2015, which was the 50th anniversary of the topping out of the Arch. Over funding delays, I think we had a couple government shutdowns during that project duration. I think we had a flood in December of, I can't remember what year it was, but it flooded the grounds yet again. Not quite 93 levels, but it was quite high and disruptive at that time. That pushed us back a while. So, and just everything else you layer on to just building in between. So that got to be, a little, add it all up. Actually, I applaud the effort that they didn't try to rush it and just say this has to happen by the 50th anniversary. They knew at some point it wasn't going to happen, and that realization to understand that the end product is going to be way more beneficial than trying to rush for a date.
And do you help manage the staffing on that or the details, or do you have a particular specialty at Trivers in terms of these projects?
Yeah. So at the time, I was just, during the time I was working on the Arch, I went from a role as a project architect to project manager to being a principal. We had the firm transition during the time that the Arch project was going on. So my role changed considerably just during that 7-year duration. So, I feel very beneficial, and it's one of the things that I like about the firm, that I've been able to work on a variety of different types of projects, some of the ones we talked about early on. But it has allowed me to really explore different ideas, different markets, the people affiliated with each market and how that works. I've honed in more on the mixed use world of, whether it's in workplace or housing work. And it's drifted a little more towards that, but I always have had a hand in some other things culturally as well.
And Trivers has a history in terms of multifamily
Hmm.
housing from the stuff with McCormick Barron,
Hmm.
and as well as just doing apartments for developers or condos for
Hmm.
different ones.
Hmm.
What's the focus of the firm right now in the
Um,
multifamily sector?
yeah, I mean, multifamily has always been a big part of it. Traditionally, it's been about between 25 and 30% of our annual revenue, but we haven't wanted it to be more than that, really, because as we've seen over the last maybe 18 months or 2 years, it can really, change with the economy pretty quickly. And not to mean too heavy on one side of that was pretty intentional. We also, I mean, within that spectrum, we work within that market. We work within the spectrum between really affordable housing, which we're doing the Clinton Peabody redevelopment currently, to we're just getting started on a new apartment building in Clayton on North Merrimack, and so the range in that is considerable. We don't do a lot of the commodity repetitive work. So whether it's affordable or on the maybe higher end market side, the projects really require creative thinking and problem solving, which is where we're probably best suited.
So for a number of years, you were at 100 North Broadway,
Mm.
had great views of the courthouse, the arch, and all that.
Yeah.
And you most recently have moved over to the Victor, formerly the Butler Brothers, a full city block. And there was a firm out of Memphis, I think, that was a developer on that, and you guys developed or did the drawings for that and helped them along. And was that your project, or was that somebody else's in the firm?
Yeah, that was one of mine. So yeah, that was about a 3-year duration, so much shorter duration. But yeah, you just have a few projects that hit a certain mark, and this one just aligned so well with our team, our relationship with our client, contractor, and it worked. It hit just the marks that it needed to, up and down, and everyone that we were working with was, had ambitious goals in mind, but were pragmatic and smart, and the way everyone conducted their business was really on par.
Sometimes it's unfortunate that a someone from outside of St. Louis has to be willing to take on a project like that. I think it'd been vacant for a number of years, and I hear it's leasing up slowly, but the developer is pleased with it. It's just improving, but slowly.
Yeah, I think last time we checked in, it was around 60%. And what's hard to wrap your head around on that is that it's 384 units. So 60% is what, 230-ish units. So, that would fill up really two maybe other buildings that we would do at as an apartment building. So adding 230 more residents at least now into that section of downtown that had nobody, is definitely seen as a win, including moving our office there. Now you have nearly 40 people working in that part of downtown every single day. So I we work with in-town developers, we work with out-of-town developers. I think it takes a great mix of both for people to see things a little bit differently and to, maybe challenge the status quo sometimes on, from either perspective. So, for St. Louis to be truly successful, what we need to happen here, it's going to take both.
In addition to the work that you do for Trivers, you also volunteer time at St. Louis Artworks, Citizens for Modern Transit, as well as I think Urban Land Institute.
Mhm.
Talk about your involvement with each of those or any of those, and how you were made those choices to be part of those organizations.
Yeah, so my role really with Artworks is really more of an emeritus role. Had been part of an advisory group from past chairs. I'd served as chair. I was on the board for 12 years there. Was role in 4 years. I think I was a chair, and that we helped them get to their new location as part of our One Plus program at Trivers to get them into their new space along Delmar. And really after that, I really stepped out of that and really was more of an advisory role. Um, Citizens for Modern Transit has been a part of that. Really got involved more on the TOD committee that the subcommittee had when we were doing Expo at Forest Park with Jeff Tegetoff and Tegetoff Development.
What about what year would that have been?
So that would have been maybe 2018
Hmm.
ish, somewhere around there.
Hmm.
So I was in really a ad hoc committee member, and then was brought on the full board at that point. When I was in grad school, I had interned at Metro in the Arts and Transit division under Sarah Smith at that point, and really learned a lot about transit. Helped the decisions or helped design in the cross county extension, and sat with all the artists and designers that were part of that, and really understood a lot about how people use those public spaces. And so that always had a great um, I don't know, design voice in the back of my head when designing transit oriented development. I'd used Metrolink 10 years to get to work. So I was a commuter as well. So that really informed how that was for me to be a part of that group.
What is the role of good design in terms of what's going on downtown?
Oh, I mean, we really, as a firm, we believe that, the design, good design, thoughtful design, really has value to that. Um, you know, we talk about it a lot, because we don't have San Diego weather or Santa Barbara weather, we don't have the mountains or the ocean. Whatever we create for ourselves is up to us. Whether what kind of environment that we want to live in. Everybody talks about like, oh, I love going to these great cities and they have great architecture and they have this great urban environment, and we have that power to make that decision, and it's what we have to demand of ourselves and what our community demands of us to create those great spaces. Yes, that sometimes that takes a little bit more time and thought to put into it, but you look at the consequences of not doing that and what can happen when that doesn't happen. Those far outweigh the consequences, I think, of spending a little more time and being thoughtful and intentional about what you are putting into place.
Did you work on the Doorways project on Jefferson?
I did not. That was not a big project for me, although it was huge for the firm.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, and that's a little bit further north on
Yeah,
Jefferson, in terms again that commitment that Trivers has had
yeah.
for those types of things. And I think originally Doorways was in the Central West End, and I think that also had a very long time frame as far as that project finding a new home. There's a sculpture out front,
Yeah.
and it seems like that's going to help transform that area as well.
Yeah, again, it's one parcel at a time, and again, when we work with our clients. I mean, we can only do as good of work as what our clients are where they're willing to go. And fortunately for Doorways organization, Opal Jones have the vision to not do business as usual. Let's make something here that these people, deserve to have. They're going through a difficult time um, of their lives of being, unhoused and having, HIV and all the complications that come with that. And doesn't mean they should be devoid of the dignity of being having a place to sleep and be safe and have access to medication. And we're just finishing the third phase of that, which is additional housing complex that we're adding additional beds to that facility as well. So, a lot of emphasis has been placed on Jefferson for its, connection to NGA. But there's a lot of stretch of parcels that are between, 64 and 44 and 70 and NGA that are a big part of that.
Well, they just redid a lot of the sidewalks and the street lights and repaving. Everyone just thinks that that just happens, but that's really the start of table stakes of the
Yeah.
stuff so that people feel safe and have that connector. And I believe the north-south connector, which was originally going to come further downtown,
Yeah.
is anchored on Jefferson.
Yeah, it is. And through our Citizens Vermont and Transit group, we had a great tour of up and down that, the Jefferson alignment or proposed Jefferson alignment, and that really will be a public realm, right? All that infrastructure, it's I think it's a lot psychological as well. If you're moving up and down that corridor and the streets are a mess and the sidewalks are a mess and the curbs aren't
Yeah.
contiguous
Seems
and
like nobody cares.
nobody cares.
Yeah.
And so why should I invest here and why should I care? So you look somewhere else. But then as you start to see that happening and they're like, oh, okay, somebody's putting some money in this. And that's a great role for the city to play, to be that catalyst to try to make more things happen.
So we've got all these vacant buildings downtown. It's not the first time in the 90s there were a couple of hundred vacant buildings. A lot of them were lofts, and that big chunk of that was on Washington and Olive. And we now have different kinds of vacant buildings that are going to be coming on, which are more of these high rises. There's about
Mhm.
10 million square feet of commercial office space downtown.
Mhm.
The last new building of that scale or of that was the brand new ground up was built in the 80s. Uh, what are we going to do with all these vacant office buildings or ones that are, B and Cs? And are there design opportunities in terms of conversions or, from an architect's point of view, what can we do with these things?
Yeah, I don't know. Might be an unpopular opinion, but my perspective on AT&T specifically is just let it wait. That's not a huge one in my. This is just my perspective. As long as it has a good envelope and it's secured, and you're keeping water out of it, we may have to tackle that one another day. And buildings like railway, I think, are certainly um, more critical in my viewpoint.
Mm.
You're not going to be able to replace that type of building, that beauty. It was once the tallest building west of the Mississippi River, um, and just for what that was. When I started working downtown, and when you were working
Yeah.
downtown, that was a full building. You had a department store of 5 stories of famous bar at the time, that you had office people there. It was truly a mixed use structure. Um, and there's not going to be a silver bullet that takes care of what these things are. We have to think creatively about what they can be and what can be in these environments, and to truly make them work. It's interesting when you mentioned some of the vacant buildings over here. When we were working downtown at the same time, a lot of the buildings that are now occupied weren't at the time, and a lot of buildings that were occupied at the time are now not. It's almost feels like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, approach to where we've been. But um, you know, not every building. There's been a lot of conversations to office to residential. We've been doing that for years, for buildings that were really pre-war. And the research shows, not every building is going to be up for this. Really between 10 and 15% or more opt for a post World War II setup that are more aligned towards a residential conversion. So we have to be focused about what we think about for that in downtown, and then think about what we can do for the rest. Um, my guess is there's not going to be an absence for any office space. As you certainly can absorb some of these others into other uses, it makes other office space, that much more maybe sought after.
And I think what's different about this particular downturn, the post-COVID hybrid workspace, is there are always these ups and downs, in particular in real estate, where you have market corrections, places overbuilt. But the question is this permanent?
Hmm.
And where, uh, or as this cycles through, which could be a very long time frame of, we're 4 or 5 years into whatever it is that we
Hmm.
are right now. If this goes on for another 10 years or so, and but it does remind me a little bit of coming downtown and seeing Washington Avenue, which was the garment district, and seeing really not even the first floor is occupied anymore. And a lot of
Hmm.
these things where there was, the diamond wholesaler guy on the
Hmm.
second floor
Hmm.
or those different things. And so the question is, how does the city reinvent itself? And unfortunately in St. Louis, the model seems to be is you just tear stuff down and then somebody comes along and does the next thing. And so we take a look. We haven't really even mentioned this building, the Post, which you guys were
Hmm.
fairly integral to, and saving a building like this, which they're messy renovations that are very expensive with a lot of surprises. But you guys have been very much involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, St. Louis, in its boom, created phenomenal architecture. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of that. We talked about the arch grounds leading up, that entire section down there, rivaled the French Quarter even more so. The cast iron storefronts and some of the architecture that was down there.
Yeah, and that exhibit I referenced earlier has the photos, and they're a whole wall worth, and it's incredible to see what that was. And I think it's been
Yeah.
also detailed in books, building by building.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, interestingly, fact, I don't know if everybody knows, but the National Park Service does have a record of everything that was torn down on that. I actually found the building. A family friend was looking for that he tied his ancestry down to on First Street, and I was able to locate the building through the archives because we were doing the project at the time, and locate that. And I got it. I got him that photo for a Christmas gift. That was
that's
a
neat.
pretty unique one. Um, so I think we have to protect what we have. It's not going to last forever without investment, and that's a big part of what we do. And our historic tax credits in Missouri are, it literally are models for the rest of the country. And it's worked, helped this building, it helped others, helped our Butler building, and countless others in downtown and throughout the state. And it even more so in this environment where costs have risen, that we need that incentive to make that work. And that is a part of our legacy that is something that we have to keep telling that story. We have to think of ways to reuse what we've got. It's a sustainable mindset. It tells a story. There's a history that's connected to it. So when people leave and come back, they can understand, not only St. Louis in 24, but 1924 and 1824, and understand, what that lineage and what that story is. Not all of it's great, and it's not going to be, but doesn't mean that story shouldn't be told and people shouldn't know.
As far as projects on the horizon for you or for Trivers, what's going to be? What if we were to have this in 2 or 3 years? What would we be talking about?
Well, I mentioned earlier that the Clinton Peabody project is really exciting. It's really reimagining that whole section of really south of Shoto, where that those buildings are currently. There used to be, I believe, 68 different buildings on that site, all from 1942, designed for public housing, and the engagement process that we've endeavored with our client with POA has been really remarkable. You get the residents engaged, and they've been, unfortunately and quite frankly, taken advantage of, and false promises over many years and decades. So it takes a while for that trust to get reestablished and reconnected. But in order for that to really hold true, you got to follow through in what you're doing. And being able to take a section of the city that was, has been disconnected, figure out ways to reconnect to the city grid, architecturally reunite what that might look like, provide safe, beautiful homes or housing for people, is really um, gratifying, I would say, in the end.
So if you talk about different public housing models and you look at the most infamous example, I guess, would be Pruitt-Igoe.
Mm.
And you, again, I keep talking about this exhibit, but they have pictures of that and how there was this, the scale of the city
Hmm.
and tore down just acres and acres of land to put these up that then within 20 years were um, had to be imploded because they became so unsafe. And the idea of centralization and high concentration clearly doesn't work.
Right.
A few blocks north of here on Cass, they're redeveloping. I think it's Carr Square to Preservation
Yep.
Square near some of the McCormick Baron. I don't know if you guys got involved with that, but there seems to be a different model um, for public housing. And at the end of the day, there has to be some type of partnership where the individual has a stake or a sense of ownership, and it isn't something where they're just, you know, put in like this box
Right.
with a thousand other things. And it seems that diversity, maybe housing that's market housing and those types
Hmm.
of things. So when you look at something like Clinton Peabody,
Hmm.
other than the fact that the age of the home or
Hmm.
the buildings are a certain thing, are you finding that what are some ways that you're looking at changing the model to be more successful?
Yeah. All points that everything that you talked about with earlier failures is certainly, forefront of mind on that. It's we do have a mixed income group for one. That is a big part of it. I think some of the residents there, some of the older residents, actually came from Pruitt-Igoe when it was torn
Mm.
down, so they remember that. Um, we have a building that's a 4-story multifamily that's along Shoto, ones and two beds. And then we've got a very, some walk up units or 3-story walk up, no elevator type buildings that have 3 beds, 2 bed and 1 bed mixes in those. And then further in the development, that's not part of the first phase yet, but townhome types setups, and that's being explored also for purchase or for rent, and that setup as well. So, you hear, the way it's an intergenerational community. There's kids and babies and people that have been there for 50 years, and so sometimes people don't want to be around a family unit that's got maybe 4 or 5 kids in there and a 3 bedroom. They want to live a little more quietly, or they need the elevator, for instance. So it allows multiple people with multiple abilities or desires or life situations to be included in this. All these people were around the table when we were working through designs, and we had LJC at the table working with us as far as master planning the whole community as well, and working with that. I think what you have to do in these situations is listen to folks and not just nod your head and just say, yeah, okay, whatever, we're going to still do what we want. You come back and you show them, we heard you say this. Originally we were going to have, I think, islands in the setups, and I think those came out for allowing people to have dining room tables that they want to be able to incorporate
So
into their
something very
units.
practical.
Very
Yeah.
practical. Some it can be, I like this brick versus this brick, and you incorporate that and show that you're listening. And again, what you're doing on that is building that trust that they know that you're thinking about what their best outcome can be, and that you're there to advocate for them and not just cram your agenda down their throat.
And in a racially segregated in a history, a very difficult history of St. Louis, do you find that there are design decisions or things that you can do to help mend some of that, or is that just beyond what a designer can do?
I think we always have to be aware of it. We have to understand why certain things were designed a certain way, and whether that was intentionally to exclude because of race or class or
Like the
ability,
redlining and all that, and
all of that, right? So, or religion, however, and St. Louis has all of that embedded in its history. One of the things that we are being very intentional about is incorporating principles of trauma-informed design on Clinton Peabody. A lot of these people have had, traumatic moments, or they've lost children. I remember talking to a woman; her son was shot and killed.
gun violence.
Gun violence.
So how does that impact then what you guys are doing?
It is, all the way to the color palettes, to sight lines, to
Are there programmatics that you have to incorporate that?
I mean, a lot of that is driven through our client, who have an excellent, management setup with their folks and how they manage their projects or their properties. And so they have very specific ways that they work with their residents and tenants. And obviously, it's very imperative that the design help further their goals on that front.
As far as for the firm in St. Louis, and how are things looking forward?
Well, we celebrate our 50th anniversary next year, so we're doing a little reflection on what that has meant for us as a firm and how we've evolved over that time, and what's been consistent and foundation. I mean, our adaptive reuse has really been one of our main threads, as well as affordable housing. Those things have really stayed with the firm all through the duration that we've been practicing since Andy Trivers founded the firm in 1975. To your point about feeling negative and getting down on things, and it is really hard to see that. There is a lot to be positive about. I do hope. I think our job as architects is we're always challenged to see the world not as it is, but how it could be, right? So I think we really have to keep that in mind and be positive with our clients. And we have clients that, we're doing a project downtown. Hopefully it should hit the press here shortly, about their investment that they're putting into a downtown office tower. And, they're very bullish about what that it can be. When people come, you mentioned out of town developers, and coming in and she's like, gosh, you guys have all this, great public space, and things are free and easy to get to, and this great architecture, and they're kind of like, what are we missing here? And then some of the problems, start to arise, and every city has issues. Our issues, are issues that we have to deal with, and until we deal with them, they're going to constantly be an issue for us. So that's something that we have to take head on, deal with it, and move on, if we're really going to, not keep revisiting the same conversations over and over.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that in a post-COVID world, those CBDs that were kind of a monoculture of commercial office space are suffering more than those that had a more diverse. So, like a place like Nashville downtown, which has seemed to have figured out the live, work, play, and entertainment, seems to be doing very well. It was doing well before COVID, and seems to be doing fine. And if you even like places like Minneapolis, which is, again, I think you could rattle off cities that are having these issues, and it would seem that the path forward is not trying to replace a dense urban core with commercial office space, but to pick up on the diversity that, if you look down the road 20, 30, 40 years, and to your point earlier, maybe that does happen one parcel at a time, one building at a time, but you're aiming at a diverse, multi-tiered thing that is not so vulnerable to a single event.
Yeah, and I don't know. I got to make sure my stats are right on this, but I believe between Nashville and Minneapolis, I think the GDP of St. Louis region is actually higher than both those regions,
Right.
even though they might be their downtowns might be. more successful. And, you know, I think that to me is a big differentiator of the conversations that other regions have to what we have. I feel like our region has given up on our downtown and just say it's not going to happen. Of course, not everybody feels that way. That's a big, you know,
Oh yeah,
generalization,
some
but
some people have. They're just people who won't come downtown except unless there's a ball
right.
game or something like that.
Right. And, you know, a lot of that stems from, you know, we talked about the pandemic and there's, you know, issues of safety and violence that came from that. But the stats also show that that's decreased
Yeah, it's
considerably.
yeah, it's improving, right?
And you know, but that doesn't happen. That there's a delayed effect
Mhm.
for that to hit people and for people to feel comfortable and safe. You know, it can take years to build. It's the saying about trust, right? You can take years to build it, but it takes one moment to destroy it. So I think that's similar to our downtown. Into that momentum, it's very fragile, and to see it shaken can set it back. But I think, you know, we have to think as a region. You know, it's going to lift everybody up. The more successful this downtown can be, it's going to help our entire region. It's not, you know, the success of downtown is not at the expense of Chesterfield or St. Charles or Hazelwood or Florissant or, you know, Afton. It's going to help everybody here.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Okay.